This is Chthonia, the world of the dark feminine. Hello and welcome to Chthonia, the podcast dealing with the dark feminine. I'm your host, Breach Burke. Now this week we are going to talk about another daimon. Okay, rather than a daimon is not exactly a deity. Sometimes in some contexts may be viewed as a deity. Definitely certainly a kind of natural or intermediary spirit. Now, we had talked about Lethe in a podcast that was a couple weeks ago. Initially, Lethe and this week's subject were supposed to go together. But because I've had some technological difficulties with podcasts. In fact, usually my method is I record about 6 months worth in advance, just so it's easier when I'm traveling and doing other things to make sure that there's always an episode ready and there's always a video ready to go as well as audio. But a lot of my audio, and I suspect this may have something to do with the way files are being transferred from my drives, have all gotten, absolutely screwed up in ways that you couldn't even imagine. My introduction, you have the little musical intro to this, was completely destroyed and was overwritten by part of another interview that I did. And what's weird is that the interview and that audio are not even on the same device. So it's very, very strange. I have a lot of, there's been a lot of that, or files just completely disappearing, or when I open them, they say, oh, I'm sorry, this was corrupted, it didn't work right, or it starts for some reason merging 3 or 4 completely random podcasts that I've done in the past together, and then you only have a piece of what the original audio was that I did. Anyway, not to digress into that, but if you've noticed that I'll put something up, then I'll pull it back, and then I'll do something again. It's just been a very, very strange first 3 months of 2022 with trying to record these podcasts. So, but we soldier on, and where I have to redo things, I redo them. So this is one example of that. And the subject of this week's podcast is Mania. Okay, now Mania, as I mentioned, is a daimon. And the term we associate mania usually with 2 things. We either associate it with madness outright, the term madness, as we will see it used in the classical world, or in the, let's just say in the Greek and Roman world, and then there's also mania that we have seen in terms of, for example, when we have the term manic depressive, you have mania as a state in which a person is very much, the word would be, it could be the heights of ecstasy. It could be the heights of just very, very energetic, perhaps chaotic and frenetic kind of behavior that isn't necessarily negative. Mania may often be interpreted sometimes as a very, very happy state, or just one in which one is, for example, I've known of people experiencing mania who think that they're Jesus Christ come back or something like that. It's just kind of this, this state of mind that is, it's actually almost overdone with its anxiety and with its, imagination, kind of going a little bit, way off the rails in terms of what might be considered to be realistic. One of the books I had read on manic depression from a psychiatrist who suffered from it. I can't remember her name now. I read this book in grad school, but she had talked about when she would go into mania, like she would just suddenly decide to go on a shopping spree and spend $20,000. Things like that. I think I'm for some reason I'm not finding the right singular term for it, but people who have experienced it know it can just be a state where there's a tremendous amount of energy, and some people thrive on their mania too. Depending on there's different gradients of manic depression, but depending on which one you have, some people really, really enjoy having that energy in that stage. And again, depending on how elevated it gets, it doesn't have to be, there's times when sometimes, people do use it as a creative spark or as a period of time if the rest of the symptoms are not too serious in terms of how they affect their lives and the lives of other people. But anyway, that's just, these are just where we hear this term mania or manic, or, you think of it as being a certain kind of a fervor that goes with it, like a real frenzied kind of fervor. When we think of Dionysus and the Maenads, for example, the way that they run around in a frenzy and tear things apart. I don't know that the term Maenad comes from mania, but there does seem to be a kind of similarity there in the way that we look at those words. Now I'm going to talk about mania. Really, in a sense, there's sort of 5 different subtopics here. The first one I'm going to talk about is the Etruscan mania. Okay, because mania in Etruria and in that that what we tend to think of as pre-Roman, but it's early Italian people who were very much influenced by the Greeks, interestingly enough. We want to talk about their conception of mania as related to the underworld. So that's the first thing I want to talk about. And of course, that connection, we connect mania or the term mania with the dead. Okay, so we're going to go talk about that first. And the second thing we're going to talk about is the Greek mania. Okay, because mania is represented as a force, does appear in certain Greek dramas, and is mentioned in certain texts in certain contexts. So we're going to look at that. And then along with mania, the Greek mania, we're also going to look at Lyssa, because Lyssa is usually paired with mania, and Lyssa has to do with rage. So that's mania in the sense of that kind of possessed fervor that one has that drives one to do something like commit murder or kill or just go. I think the more northern term would be to go berserk, right? So we're going to talk about the relationship to Lyssa, because Lyssa and mania are often mentioned in the same context. And then, of course, I'm going to mention Maniae as a group, because they sometimes, mania is not represented as one daimon, but rather as a cluster or a group of beings. And similarly to the way that the Furies or the Erinyes are mentioned that way. And finally, I'm going to talk about the Roman mania. You think that the Ruskin and the the Roman and the Etruscan, I put those 2 words together. That's pretty funny. The Roman mania, you would think as being, somewhat similar to the other. And yes, of course, there's similarities between all of these. But in Rome, there's this interesting inflection of mania as the mother of the Lares, who are the household gods. So we're going to talk about that as well, and then just have some finishing thoughts on the whole concept of mania. So let's start with the Etruscans. Okay, so Etruscans, and as it's mentioned, Roman as well, Mania is often the goddess of the dead. So this is a connection with Rome, even though we're talking about Rome later. It says, she, along with Mantus, ruled the underworld. She's said to be the mother of ghosts, the undead, and spirits of the night, as well as the Lares and the Manus. Okay, now there's the Lares. We're going to talk about that in a bit. So her names link her to the Manus, to Mana Gentia, and Manius. Okay. And now, now this is interesting. The etymology suggests that the Greek and Latin mania derive from, in the Proto-Indo-European, from men meaning to think. Okay, and it could be having to do with mind or thought, like spirit of mind or thought. So this is almost like a possession of someone's thought, or kind of a derailment of what you would think of as rational thought. Okay, so again, so as a spirit of the dead, mania is also associated with chaos. Now, the connection to the spirit to ghosts and spirits of the dead is also interesting because this is an attribute that we usually see, or that we certainly saw later on in later versions of her mythology in Hecate, or Hecate. I'm playing with all these different pronunciations here. They're both right, really, but as I hear more of them, I find myself fluctuating between the two. Any case, Mania is, so we see this connection with the dead. Now you see the term Manus. Manus, as I have mentioned before, is a term that has to do with usually the restless or angry dead. So you have this idea of, again, this frenzied idea. Although the term Manus, in terms of the way it was used to refer to the dead, usually is a term like Erinyes, which means the kindly ones, or Eumenides is really the kindly ones, or the Semni Theai. It's the idea that you speak kindly of the dead so that you don't anger them. But that connection to ghosts makes, if we talk about Mania as the queen of ghosts or queen of the dead, then spirits obviously would be Manes, would be, sort of the subjects, as it were, of Mania. So that's sort of an interesting thing to note, in which case here, are we seeing Mania then as, what does this imply about the dead? And does this Mania also have the conception of her as, if she's chaotic, of also being frenzied? That's not always entirely clear. Certainly in this particular version, we're not necessarily seeing a reference to madness, or what's referred to as madness per se. So, in fact, the connection to the household gods, which we're going to talk about, seems to imply something quite different. So that's the Etruscan Mania. That's the one. Now, the Greek one is probably the one we're more familiar with. Now, Mania is described, and I'm looking at theoi.com here, personified spirits, daimons of madness, insanity, and crazed frenzy, closely related to Lyssa, the spirit of mad rage, and the Erinyes, or Furies. Okay. Now, I've done another whole podcast on the Erinyes, but this one, but we haven't talked about Lyssa, so I'm going to mention her as well. And yes, these Mania, they are conceived of as being feminine. The names are feminine, the endings are feminine. And the Encyclopedia of Greek and Roman Biography and Myth says that there are certain mysterious deities who had a sanctuary in the neighborhood of Megalopolis in Arcadia, and whom Pausanias considered to be the same as the Eumenides. Okay, so some people made them Mania interchangeable. That would square with if you've read the Aeneid, the way in which the Furies appear in the Aeneid who plant serpents in the breast of Turnus, who is Aeneas's rival for the king of the Latins, for his daughter. I want to say her name's Lavinia. I can't quite remember. I don't have my copy with me, and I get a lot of my L names confused in there. But she is, but initially Turnus has no interest in fighting Aeneas when he comes, because he fulfills a prophecy, and he's the foreigner who was expected to come, and and his marriage to the king of the Latins' daughter is somehow going to be a precursor to the destiny of Rome and that sort of stuff. But Juno, who is Hera or Juno, and you'll see that she's actually very much involved with Mania. This is not the only instance where we see her. She sends the Furies to go, to plant these serpents in the breast, to make it to whip him into a frenzy and to make him angry. So it's easy to see that connection with the Furies. Though the Furies I tend to think of more as being boundary setters. To me, Mania is more about breaking boundaries. Like, it's the kind of behavior, like I said, I associate with the Maenads, something that doesn't respect a certain boundary. Perhaps there could be a frenzied or chaotic response from these kinds of deities, but I don't think that their function is the same. So, So let's look at some of the references to mania in the literature. So Theognis Fragment 1, I'm looking at cruel eros, or love, the Maniae, spirits of madness, took you up and nursed you. Okay, so that's a reference to mania or Maniae in the plural. And there's the idea that they were the nurses of the baby Eros, of Cupid. So, and this, of course, is a commentary on the madness that can be brought to somebody from falling in love, right? Aeschylus will refer to mania as reckless mania or madness from the gods. And they suggest, the authors suggest that mania was perhaps personified here. Like this was a spirit sent by the gods. And that would make sense in the context of a daimon, which is an intermediary or messenger spirit. Or a spirit that is sent. Certainly in biblical tradition, both angels and demons are daimons of a type. I mean, we use the term daimon, becomes demon, and we give it a negative association. But angels are technically daimonic as well, because they are sent with a specific purpose. Messenger deities also have a daimonic, while they not always consider daimons in and of themselves, sometimes they simply have it, like Hermes or Iris in the Greek, who are often sent by the gods to bring specific messages. But in this case, we're looking at spirits that are sent to create a kind of condition, usually a kind of psychological condition. So, so in a way, you're talking about personification of almost psychological forces. So, as daimonic, as something that's visited upon you by the gods. Now, Quintus Smyrnaeus, in his Fall of Troy, which was written, that was a Greek epic, but it was written in the 4th century CE, so it's very late. It's definitely, much later than the Iliad, Odyssey, or any of the epic cycle. Mentions that how Ajax was driven mad when the armor of Achilles was awarded to Odysseus, and slew a flock of sheep, imagining they were his Greek enemies. Thinking that amidst the slain, Odysseus lay blood-baltered at his feet. But in that moment, from his eyes, Athena tore away the nightmare fiend of mania, havoc-breathing, and it passed then swiftly to the rock-walled near river Styx, where dwell the winged Erinyes, they which still visit with torments overweening men. Okay, so what the reference that he's making here is to the episode that's mentioned by Sophocles and others in earlier Greek dramas, where Ajax, again, he's driven mad in a way by his rage over the fact that Odysseus wins the armor of Achilles in the funeral games for Achilles. Because Ajax, as I have mentioned in other episodes about the nature of war and warriors, Ajax follows the traditional heirs model. He's the straight up fighting man. He fights based on his strength. He fights hand to hand, directly, upfront, confrontational. Odysseus' style, while Odysseus, you do see examples of him fighting that way, his best way is by, guerrilla tactics, by being sneaky, by manipulating a situation, not necessarily doing a direct, honest front, face-to-face kind of combat. What we're often looking at with Odysseus is, he's crafty. And in Ajax's view, that's not being a real warrior, being crafty and being shifty. So in that sense, Odysseus is more like Athena, because Athena is a goddess of strategy. She's not just about, draw your sword and let's fight it out. Okay, yes, that does happen, but she uses her mind as well as her strength. And in fact, in all cases where Athena goes head to head with the god Ares, the other god of war, technically her brother, when they go head to head with each other, Athena always wins, because the idea is that strategy, having a strategy does more, and being able to, not just being a forward moving killing machine, having a strategy to sidestep the enemy. Has more weight than, or has the potential to be a better way to come out on top, rather than rather than just always, approaching something directly. It's sort of like those cartoons where you see the person gets angry and they go charging at somebody head first, and then the character just steps out of the way, and then the person smashes their head into a brick wall. That kind of a thing. Just sometimes just avoidance at the right moment does more than actively like trying to charge back, for example, where then both people knock their brains out. So it's that kind of a thing. And so what happens is Athena, instead of, because Ajax then plans to slaughter all the Greek all of his fellow Greek generals, as a revenge, just because he's so angry. So Mania, but Mania is sent to instead take his frenzy, and he turns it on some animals that were taken, which as I've said, I never like to read about that scene in Sophocles' play or anywhere else. But the idea was that he would kill the animals instead of killing the Greek, killing the generals. And then Athena brings Odysseus over, and she's like, hey, check this out. Look what I did. And Odysseus is horrified. He's just like, how could this man, he can tell the man has gone mad. So Athena then sends madness away. So in this particular thing, we see that she literally sends madness away. And madness is treated as this winged creature who lives, in the underworld, by the rock-walled river Styx. Okay, so and hangs out with the Furies. So we have this image of Mania as this nightmare fiend, havoc breathing, and it passed swiftly back to where it came from. Okay, now in Ovid's Metamorphoses, he talks about malign Tisiphone, which is one of the Erinyes, seized a torch steeped in blood, put on a robe all red, dripping with gore, and wound a snake around her waist, and started from her home. That is, she departed from the underworld on a mission to drive Athamas mad. And with her, as she went, were Luctus, grief, or Penthos, and Pavor, dread, or Phobos, and terror, fear, or Demos, and Insania, madness, or mania, too with frantic face. So this is a quote from Ovid in which we see Mania going out in the company of grief, terror, fear. Well, Greek dread, fear, and one of the Furies, one of the Erinyes. So these are all of these. So again, you see that these are all daimonic representations. So the idea is that these mental afflictions are visited upon you by the gods. They're intermediaries of the gods, and they're sent from the underworld. Now, again, if you want to pull the psychological interpretation from this, these are all of these things that we, all of these feelings that we try to keep under control with our conscious minds. But occasionally circumstances are such that they overwhelm us, that there is some, perhaps looked at as kind of divine intervention, if you want to look at it from that view of consciousness. But the idea is that those forces come and they take away the rationality of people. So, So it takes away your, your ability. Excuse me. It takes away your ability to be, to sit down and reasonably talk something out or negotiate. Instead, you just go mad and you behave in a way that is chaotic. Okay, so we see in the Greek that mania is represented in this way. So with that, let's talk a little bit about Lyssa. Okay, because Lyssa is connected here. And okay, so again, looking at theoi.com. theoi.com, by the way, if any of you are interested in learning more about some of these figures and seeing what the original source material is that's connected to them, theoi.com is excellent. A lot of ads on this site, but it's free, and I frequently have my Greek myth students go to this site when they're just looking for basic information, because again, it not only gives you the basic information, but it gives you things from, authoritative sources like the encyclopedias of myth and so forth. And then it also gives you the translated original texts. So, So this is a really good, for trying to find primary source material, where, you hear the story of a particular figure, but where's this from? Okay. So Lyssa, back to this. Lyssa is the goddess of, or personified spirit, a daimon, of mad rage, fury, crazed frenzy, and an animal's rabies. The Athenians spelt her name Lytta. Lyssa was a figure of Athenian tragedy. In Aeschylus, she appears as an agent of Dionysus sent to drive the Maniaes mad. Okay, the Maniaes, that story is told, the version I've seen of it is in Ovid. There might be another version mentioned here. But the Maniaes were a group of sisters who refused to celebrate the feast of Dionysus. And instead they, because again, for the same reason that perhaps Pentheus or Labdacus or any of the other ones did not, Pentheus and, Dionysus' own, I guess they're cousins, that refused to accept his status as a god. I mean, as a god of wine, and he has all these followers, and they're, dancing around, and they're ecstasy, and all this kind of stuff, and they say, well, you're not proper enough to be a real god, right? But then, so Dionysus would visit those who did not accept him and accept his role with madness. And in this case, they talk about the Maniaes being visited by Mania, or by Lyssa, rage. And also, so there's this story, because the Maniaes sit singing songs to Athena instead of to Dionysus during the Dionysus festivals. So they're driven mad, and actually in Ovid's version, they're also turned into bats. Which actually, if you've ever heard the phrase "bats in your belfry," that's another reference to being mad. Okay, so that's, interesting. In Euripides, she's sent by Hera to inflict Heracles with madness. Yes, there's that story. And what happens in that story is that Heracles, that's her punishment. She of course despises Heracles anyway, but she's going to punish him, and but Lyssa is actually afraid. She doesn't want to, and she actually asks Hera to reconsider, and Hera tells her, I order you what to do. You don't argue with me about it. You just do what I tell you, which tells you that, the daimons are, hierarchically lesser than the gods. But think about somebody with the brute strength of Heracles also going mad. That's usually a recipe for disaster. And it's funny how even the daimons seem to know that, at least in Euripides' play. But what Heracles does is he ends up murdering his wife and children. And then that's what precipitates his need to do his 12 labors. To, at least in part, to atone for his guilt. Okay, and it says Greek vase paintings depict Lyssa standing beside Actaeon as he is torn apart by his maddened hounds. Okay, that's a story having to do with Artemis. Okay, as Actaeon, sadly ends up seeing her. Catches her naked while she's bathing, not intentionally, but Artemis is extremely chaste, and you don't look at her lady parts. So she turns him into a deer, and he's pursued by his own hounds, who are then going to tear him apart. So Mania, again, there's the idea of the madness of that scenario. And it says, in this scene, Lyssa appears as a woman dressed in a short skirt and crowned with a dog's head cap, representing the madness of rabies. So that's interesting. We tend to think of dogs as being associated with Hecate. And, so here we have this, and of course you have the three-headed dog who guards the underworld. You have Kerberos. There's this madness of rabies, okay? And so the ideas of dogs and rabies having to, that frothing at the mouth, madness that comes, that's brought about by rabies, that's actually extremely dangerous, because you don't want to be bit or attacked by a rabid animal, or a rabid person for that matter. But it's... But that's interesting that you have that association with dogs, and you wonder if that's another association that ends up tying dogs to the underworld, because dogs can sometimes act as a guide. For example, in the jackal-headed god Anubis. I mean, you might say a jackal is not a dog, but there is definitely this, Jackal is kind of a dog-like figure. And certainly when you start seeing the syncretism with Hecate and with other beings, that are connected to dogs, like Scylla, for example, they all have this underworld association. So here's yet another one. The daimon representing, this mad rage that and rabid behavior, or rabies, is associated here with dogs. Lyssa was closely related to the Maniae. Okay. Goddesses of mania and madness. Her Roman equivalents were Ira, Furor, and Rabies. Sometimes she was multiplied into a host of Irae and Furores, which we're going to talk about in a moment. Okay, now allegedly Lyssa is the child of Nyx, the night goddess, and the blood of Uranus. Okay, that's what according to Euripides and the Heracles, that's where she comes from. We'll probably see that. Or she's listed as in Hyginus Preface, or it says preface, but it's Preface. The Aether, which is the blue sky, and Gaia, the Earth Mother, are actually the parents of Lyssa. So we have a fragment from Aeschylus, where this is the primary source quotes. Lyssa speaks in a play describing the madness inflicted by Dionysus upon either the impious daughters of the Minyas or the Maenads who dismembered Pentheus. They say it says from the feet up, the crown of the head steals the spasm, the stab of Lyssa, the scorpion sting. Okay, so being stung by that's the sensation of being stung by frenzy or madness. In Euripides' Heracles, the specters of Lyssa and madness and Iris appear from above. The chorus sees them. And the chorus says, see there, my old comrades, is the same wild panic fallen on us all? What phantom is this I see hovering over the house? Fly, fly, bestir your tardy steps, be gone away. O Savior Prince, avert calamity from me. And Iris says, courage, old men, she whom you see is Lyssa, daughter of Nyx, and I am Iris, the handmaid of the gods. We have not come to do your city any hurt, but our warfare is against the house of one man only, against whom they call Heracles. Okay. For until he had finished all his grievous labors, destiny was preserving him, nor would Father Zeus ever suffer me or Hera to harm him. But now that he has accomplished the labors of Eurystheus, Hera wished to brand him with the guilt of shedding kindred blood by slaying his own children, and I wish it also. Come then, unwed maid, child of black Nyx, harden your heart relentlessly, send frenzy upon this man. So she has this whole speech. And Lyssa finally says, of noble parents was I born, the daughter of Nyx, sprung from the blood of Uranus. And these prerogatives I hold, not to use them in anger against friends, nor do I have any joy visiting the homes of men. So Lyssa apparently gets no joy out of her job. And I wish to counsel Hera before I see her and you too, if you will hearken my words. This man against whose house you are sending me has made himself a name alike in heaven and earth. For after taming pathless wilds and raging sea, he by his single might raised up again the honors of the gods when sinking before man's impiety. Wherefore I counsel you, do not wish him dire mishaps. And Iris says, spare us your advice on Hera's and my schemes. And Lyssa says, I seek to turn your steps into the best path instead of this one of evil. And Iris says, it was not to practice self-control that the wife of Zeus sent you here. And so Lyssa says, I call Helios, the sun god, to witness that I'm acting against my will. But she does what she's told. Okay. Okay. So as far as the Roman Mania, there's some discussions of this here. But I'll move on to that when I talk about the Roman Mania. So as we can see, Lyssa or anger, you tend to see the mania as being grouped with this kind of, with Lyssa in this case, with this frenzy, this mad rage frenzy, and also with the Furies or the Erinyes. And so that moves on to the other discussion that I have of Maniae as a group rather than as a single being that, as it was implied in the one that in the story of Ajax, that sort of stands over and causes this this mental affliction in this individual. Now the Maniae, it's the singular of which is Mania, are spirit or group of spirits personifying insanity, madness, and crazed frenzy, right? So that's not too, not too big of a jump. And of course, they operate closely with Lyssa, and are presumed to be daughters of Nyx. So they are presumed to be embodiments or coming out of the night, because the night is pure void, potential, chaos. And Night herself, I did do a podcast on Nyx as well. It has an element to her. While she is very much revered, she's also very feared, because in the darkness, you don't know what's coming out of the darkness. The darkness represents uncertainty. So out of this uncertainty, and if you think about it, if you think about the way in which we tend to torment ourselves mentally, a lot of our mental torment comes out of, ruminating on unknowns. We're in a situation, you put something out there, you take a risk, and you have silence that comes back. You haven't heard anything, so you start going, what's happening? Why am I not hearing anything? Did I do something wrong? The way in which we tend to do things. In tarot, this is the embodiment of the Nine of Swords, the way in which we are cruel to ourselves. We torment ourselves with all kinds of anxiety and maybe even furious rage and anger over what we perceive are the reactions or to us or the situations surrounding us. When there's a defensiveness there, when we perceive in some way that we are not being received in the way that we want, or that we're not being validated, or somehow we're under some kind of attack. Could be gossip, could be scandal, whatever. And a lot of times we're not. It's just the mind does that. When the mind doesn't know the answer yet, it tries to fill in that space with a lot of anxiety. So now, obviously, mad rage and frenzy goes beyond this, but a lot of times these kinds of frenzies end up coming about. Yes, there are cases where people are justifiably enraged or outraged by a particular situation that has occurred. But a lot of times we become very, very outraged when we don't really, when that state of unknowing, when we don't have a lot of information, and our mind tries to piece together the few pieces of information that we have to string together a narrative that is probably wildly inaccurate, and it can create this kind of response. So again, there's just this idea of when we're in darkness, when we don't have all the information, when there's not clarity, we have a tendency to try to sometimes create narratives that if the few bits of information we have look grim, we can work ourselves into different kinds of a frenzy. Obviously depression would be another one, but a lot of times too, again, if we perceive ourselves as not being accepted or received well, a frenzied or angry attack could be part of it. Now, of course, the kind of frenzy they're talking about here is the one that actually drives people to crimes of passion, to action. You know what I mean? Because in this one, Hera is determined, and notice it was Juno with Aeneas, and now it's Hera, and they're the same deity. Basically, one's in Juno is Roman, Hera is Greek. But they are both involved in sending out the daimons of madness, and and actually Hera also is the one who inflicts Dionysus with madness initially as well, and it's actually Cybele, the Earth Mother, who cures him. So, so we're talking about the Maniae here as a group, and of course then there's a mention here too of them as being the nurses of the god Eros, in the way that love can cause a kind of madness. Now, here's again mention again of Pausanias saying that on the road from Megalopolis to Messene there was a sanctuary which was devoted to the goddesses called Maniae, and that the surrounding districts was also called Maniae. His local sources told him that it was there that madness overtook Orestes. Orestes is the one who kills Agamemnon, a great general in the Trojan War, after his mother, Clytemnestra, kills his father. So then he goes and kills his mother. after that. Although one might suggest that Orestes was honor bound to do that. But he is apparently in a furor, and he goes in and he kills his own mother. So Pausanias' view is that the Maniae were actually the Furies, because the Furies are the ones who start to pursue Orestes for the crime of matricide. I'm not sure I agree with Pausanias on that. I mean, of course, Pausanias was a bit more contemporary to those stories, but certainly than I was. But I just feel like I've always felt like the Eumenides, or the Furies, Arrhenius, it's 3 different names for the same deity, that they're more about setting and maintaining boundaries. I think about Heraclitus' statement that if the sun, moved 1 inch out of its path, or we would think of it now as maybe its orbit, but out of it, well, not really, sun doesn't orbit, but, that if it moved out of its path, from, that the Arrhenius would push it back. So it's interesting, so how those 3 end up becoming conflated. But when we think about the Maniae as a group, there tends to be this association with the Furies in particular. So that brings us back to what we were saying about Lyssa again, as the Irae, I-R-A-E, which is the plural of Ira, I-R-A, which is the word for wrath, okay, or anger. So that brings us to the Roman mania, which is the last type of mania I wanted to mention. And so here in Theoi, they say Ira was the Roman equivalent of Lyssa, often pluralized by the Latin into a host of irae, or angers. Pseudo-Hyginus says, from Aether and Terra, earth were born. Okay, remember, that was the other, the Roman conception that they come from Aether, the blue sky, and the earth. Dolor, Dolus, Ira, Luctus, Mendacium, Jusiorandum, Vito, Intemperantia, Altercatio, Obliuio, say that 10 times fast, Secordia, Timor, Superbia, Incestum, and Pugna. And these all translate to grief, deceit, wrath, lamentation, falsehood, oath, vengeance, intemperance, altercation, forgetfulness, Secordia, which is sloth, or sloth, fear, pride, incest, and combat. Okay. So this is, according to Pseudo-Hyginus, this is these are children of earth and the blue and the shining blue sky, where all of these this host of these daimonic beings, these personifications of our troubled psychological states or troubled impulses. Now, Valerius Flaccus, in his version of the Argonautica from the 1st century CE, Aphrodite leads the Lemnian women to slaughter their unfaithful husbands. Through the terror-stricken air again and again, she, Aphrodite, makes a strange cry ring. Straightway Pavor, whose fear, Deimos, and insensate discordia, or strife, from her Getic lair, dark-browned Ira, or anger, with pale cheeks, Dolus, or treachery, rabies, or frenzy, or Lyssa, towering above the rest, Letus, or death, her cruel hands bared, come hastening up at the first sound of the Martian consort's pealing voice that gave the signal. Martian consort meaning Aphrodite as the lover of Ares, the god of war, or Mars in this case. So that's that, in other words, Aphrodite acting in a warlike manner. And I certainly in the podcast on Inanna and others as well, I've talked about but that in particular, the warlike nature of love goddesses. And this is an example of it, where in this case Aphrodite is referred to in her role as lover of Ares, or Mars. Okay, Valerius Flaccus also says, Ira, anger, and a sire whom tears awaited, Ares, urged the axe-wielding companies of Amazons against Heracles. Okay, so anger impels the Amazons to fight with Heracles. And this is in his version of the Argonautica. And then it says, Hephaestus craft the cursed necklace of Harmonia, which ultimately dooms the Thebans to a fratricidal war. Not Pasithea, eldest of the gracious sisters, or the Graces, nor Decor, charm, nor the Idalian youth did it mold it, that is, it assisted in the crafting of the cursed necklace, but grief and all the ire, and dolor, and discord, all with the craft of her right hand. So, in other words, they're saying Hephaestus made the necklace of Harmonia with the assistance of luctus, ire, dolor, and discordia. So, grief, passion, anguish, and strife. Made this. The necklace of Harmonia, if you don't know that story, when speaking of Venus and Mars, or Ares and Aphrodite, when Hephaestus, of course, or Vulcan, is the husband of Aphrodite. Zeus marries her to him because he's the least attractive of the gods, and he feels that a marriage, this will ground her or keep her in place, which it doesn't. And she very openly takes the god of war as her lover, and Hephaestus, who initially creates this kind of net to ensnare the two lovers and embarrass them, Zeus instead tells him, you're embarrassing yourself. So he eventually is made to make peace with the situation, because then Aphrodite bears a child, Harmonia, and she's the and she ends up marrying Cadmus, who is the founder of Thebes, given as his bride. And Hephaestus, who is supposed to attend the wedding of this daughter of his wife and another man, or another god, he's supposed to be gracious, but he creates the necklace of Harmonia because he's a craftsmith. But of course, it's loaded with all of these things, so it's very, very heavily cursed. So whoever has the necklace, terrible, terrible things happen to them. So there's that connection to the necklace of Harmonia, created with the assistance of Ire, as among others. Now, Statius says, amid the night wandering shades of the god of battle, Mars or Ares, from on high made to resound with the thunder of arms, the Nemean fields and Arcadian from end to end. They talks about the shades of the god of battle, filled excited hearts with passion for himself, the god of war. Furor, Ira, make trim his crest, and Pavor, which is panic, his own squire, handles his horse's reins. So again, this is the association of wrath with war. And Statius also talks as fit sentinels hold watch there, the Thracian palace of Mars Ares. From the outer gate, wild impetus, passion leaps, and blind Nephis, or mischief, and ire, the angers, in this case plural, flushing red and pallid metus, fear, and insidia, treachery, lurks within the hidden sword. Okay, so again, Statius is using all of these particular daimonic beings as personifications of what attends the god of war, all of these kinds of psychological impulses and anxieties. So there's some more of these. You get the idea. I don't need to read through all of them, but we see this idea of both Mania, Ira, and the Furies kind of being put together as these similar daimonic impulses that drive people to madness, and that madness often which drives people to doing something dangerous, to doing something violent. And obviously this connection to Lyssa as well, and you'll sometimes see them, this daimon presented individually or as a group. Okay, so that just leads to the very last point, which is this other role of Mania. And again, because obviously let's not forget that Mania also has an underworld function as well, okay, as a Chtonic function. And that Mania is said to, when not out doing the will of the gods, in this sense, afflicting psychological misery or frenzy, that Mania is in, that Mania resides in the underworld with those like her. Now, the mother of the Lares, that's the last one. The Latin is Mater Larum, identified with with different Roman deities, appears twice in the records of Arval Brethren as Mater Larum, elsewhere as Mania and Larunda. Okay. Ovid calls her Lara or Muta, the speechless one, and Takita, the silent one. And that's interesting because we don't tend to think of Mania as being silent. So the connection there is interesting. So let's see. I'm just looking through to see what the specific myth was. The cult to Matris Larum is known through Arvel, the rites to Dea Dia, a goddess of fruitfulness. So sometimes she's addressed as Juno Dia. And the mother of the Laris, addressed only as Matris Larum, she's given a sacrificial meal of porridge contained in a sacred sun-dried earthenware pot, or an ola. Prayers are recited over the pot, which is then thrown from the temple doorway down the slope on which the temple stands, thus towards the earth as a chthonic offering. Okay, so there's that chthonic association with the household gods. And so, they talk about other potential offerings, offering her 2 sheep, and then they invoke her children, who are the Laris themselves. Now, Roman households, all households had, Romans were very, I guess the term we would use is animistic in the way that they practiced their religion, and certainly there were gods associated with families and with households. And the Laris were, they were the protectors of the household. Okay, so that their protective function almost implies something chthonic, because they are, because they're there as kind of these, they're there to fight on behalf of the family, as it were. It makes me again think of Hecate and her role with the, at the doorways as this preserver of, the protection and the posterity of the family. Okay. So it's now here they were talking about, Varro says that she and her children were originally Sabine, and names her as Mania. The name is later used by Roman authors with the general sense of an evil spirit. In the late 2nd century CE, according to Festus, nursemaids used the name Mania to terrify children. Macrobius applies it to woolen figures or maniae hung at crossroad shrines during Compitalia. Now that again feels like it's got a Hecate association, right? Thought to be substitutions for ancient human sacrifice, once held at the same festival, and suppressed by Rome's first consul, L. Junius Brutus. Okay, so now the nature of the mother of the Laris, or the Mater Larum, it says, if their mother nature connects the Laris to the earth, they are, according to Taylor. Now, who are we looking at? Let's see which. Lily Ross Taylor, that's who we're referring to here. This is actually in Wikipedia, but she says that she is the spirits of the departed, and their the nature. If the mother's nature connects the Laris to the earth, they are spirits of the departed, and their mother a dark or terrible aspect of Tellus or Terra Mater. The Laris and Mater Larum have been suggested as ancient Etruscan deities. The title or forename Lars, used by Rome's Etruscan kings, has been interpreted as king, overlord, or leader. Greek authors offered heroes and daimons as translations for Laris, and Plautus employs a Lars familiaris, where Menander's Greek original has a Heron or hero shrine. Okay. So we're seeing, again, this connection with these chthonic spirits and with the dead. And where else do we see this? Well, you see it in fairy lore, certainly. The idea of, are fairies nature beings? Are they spirits of the dead? Are they both? Are they connected in some way? Is the other world connected to the fairies? That might be an easier way to think about all of these conceptions, because all of these deities had a very certainly a very chthonic aspect. They dealt with the household, they dealt with the family, they dealt with day-to-day life. So therefore, it's not surprising that these beings were chthonic in nature, because they have to do with earth, the matters of the earth, matters that are not what we tend to think of as associated with spiritual. And when I say that, I mean spiritual in the modern religious sense, okay? Or certainly not with the celestial. Now, celestial deities may have been concerned with certain chthonic functions, but it's not. But nonetheless, they're deities like Juno or Ceres, who is like Demeter. They're not. They live. They have a celestial home. Okay, they are not the actual specific forces of nature. It's more like they're forces that that these deities represent, the forces that are guided by the gods, and this gives you a different sense of the psychology of these figures, because and it probably led to something like Julian Jaynes' bicameralism theory, which where he posits that the ancient writers, like what you see in Homer, for example, represents a shift in consciousness or in the way in which we perceive certain things. Now, there's a lot about bicameralism that's been debunked. It's not worth getting into the theory because it's not generally an accepted one. But it is interesting. But I think the notion that our consciousness has a shift is quite important, and I think there's some validity there, because certainly we see it in beliefs about what we'll call the divine, or the natural world and our relationship to it, and the kind of quote unquote spiritual presence in the world. Now, I say in quote unquote because the word spirit tends to have a different inflection in, say, again, modern religious, or maybe specifically Christian religious initially, thinking, or even when we talk about ourselves as being quote unquote spiritual people. That has a different implication than what they're thinking of as a spirit here. We're either talking about spirits of the dead, or we're talking about nature spirits. And then the question is, if they're all in the underworld, are they all part of the same group? So, for instance, if the Manas are connected to Mania, okay, the Manas being the spirits of the dead, and again, usually presumed to be the angry dead, who could be restless, who might walk as ghosts, who might cause these kinds of inflictions themselves. What's the overlap between the daimonic and, daimon, not demons, as you might think of them as demons being in hell or whatever, which is, that's a whole separate side note in digression. I actually do talk about that in my underworld mythology class in Scholars of the Borderland, if you're interested in looking at that course. It's not, when we refer to something as daimonic, I mean, yeah, the question becomes, what's the line there? And these personifications of forces, I mean, are they personifications? Now, anybody who's a practitioner will tell you, well, they're not quote unquote merely personifications, that they're actually the first time you actually do rituals, Chtonic rituals, to encounter these kinds of beings, you find that they are they're not quote unquote merely psychological constructs. Although, again, I always go back to my argument that when we talk about the archetypal, we are talking about something that is not merely a label or a construct that we use. I mean, it's, in a certain sense, any term that we use is a label or a construct, because we're talking about forces that we really don't understand. But certainly what we're seeing among the Greeks, the Romans, the Etruscans, is this idea that daimons like Mania were, which represent these kinds of traumatic psychological inflictions, or the way in which chaos can inflict itself. They feel that this must be something that's controlled by the gods and sent by the gods. Okay, that the gods are the ones inflicting you, and you need to find out, what's wrong, which god you need to appease to have them send away the afflictor. Okay, which is not conceived of as something quote unquote in your head. It's something that acts on you from the outside. It's a daimonic force. Okay, which perhaps also is why maybe later on the association with the term demon becomes very negative, because when we think of these, but not all daimonic forces are personifications of what we would think of as negative things. Okay, they're just forces. But but they have sort of a personality and intelligence of their own, as we see, or at least they were conceived of as such. So it's very interesting the way what it says about psychology, about the way that we think about psychology, and the way that the Greeks conceived of this. One book that's good on this, and again, there's some people who I've read, scholars who dislike this book, but I still think it's a very good and useful book, is Dodd's Greeks and the Greeks and the Irrational. Okay, I want to say it's E.R. Dodd. I think I've got his name right. But talks a lot about this, not only about not only about these kinds of daimonic forces, but also about things like oracles. When the voice comes from the belly of the Pythia, for example, in Apollo's temple, like where do these, talks about these forces and where they might come from. So that's an interesting read. It's a classic book. You can probably find a used copy on Amazon or somewhere. It's called The Greeks and the Irrational. That's an interesting one to look at if the subject of the daimonic, as it was sort of psychologically conceived, that's a very useful text for that. So that's all I'm going to say on Mania. I want to thank you again very much for listening. Please check out Chthonia.net, Chthonia.net, where I have all my latest stuff is up there. News about publications, trying to keep the blog up to date there. I've been a little lax on that because I've been traveling, but, and then certainly, I do keep up on social media. So if you check, Chthonia podcast, 2 words on Facebook, 1 word on Instagram and Twitter, and also just Chthonia on YouTube. Certainly I try to, certainly regular postings go up there. The podcast, of course, is hosted on Spreaker, but you can get it anywhere. But I try to keep up with the latest work that I do on Chthonia, not just on the podcast, but on other projects that I have. In particular, check out Scholars of the Borderland, which is my school where I, have classes and lectures on these individual concepts. Now, you can take a full class with me, and it's all asynchronous, so it's not like you have to show up at a particular time. But you can take a class with me, in which case, when you take a class, that would mean that you actually, I have questions, you have, respond, and you get a response from me. And once you complete all of the coursework, then you get, a certificate of you having completed the course. And those, because you're usually getting a whole set of lectures, are more expensive. But I'm also in the process right now of putting up individual lectures. So maybe $15, $20 each, where you can get an individual lecture, but there's not the questions to go along with it. There's not the coursework. There's not the feedback. You're just getting the information from that lecture, as I would teach it probably in a university setting or somewhere else. And I also have a whole set that I've just finished on Death and the Maiden, which is my book that really is the basis of the Chthonia concept that I, for not only the podcast, but all my other research. And that will also be coming up. The introduction is going to be free and up on YouTube. And then the chapters, the actual exposition of the chapters, is something that's behind the paywall on Scholars of the Borderland, but it's inexpensive. You can take the whole set, or you can take just one at a time. So I'm trying to make it very accessible for people, but depending on at what level you're interested in that information. And of course, I also do individual coaching too. I have something called Transition Life Coaching. That's also talked about on Chthonia.net. It's kind of my own brand of coaching that combines a lot of the tools that I have, a lot of the esoteric tools that I have, to help people, particularly through transition and crisis. So you can check that out. Used to be called Liminal Reiki. I updated the name because a lot of people don't know what the term liminal means, and Reiki is only one very tiny, tiny, tiny piece of what I do. So it didn't really make sense. So I've made that particular change. And those who follow Transition Life Coaching on Facebook, by the way, who used to like to get daily tarot readings, I now do weekly ones. I'm starting that up again over on that particular page. So, but I've taken them off Chthonia for now. So that's the update on everything that's going on here. I want to thank you again for listening. Oh, and don't forget, if you do want to support my work on a somewhat regular basis, patreon.com/Chthonia. It's, I have a small group of people there, and, and I'm very thankful to each and every one of you for your support. But what I generally certainly at the minimum, you get early access to episodes, and you also get usually at least once a month I have like either an extra episode or outtakes from Chthonia conversations or other material that will be extra. And I'm in the process of, I'm constantly trying to see what other kinds of benefits or offers I can give to Patreon subscribers. But the place to have the input is certainly on the Patreon page. So thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.